Welcome.
Thanks for having me here.
So you're a serious journalist. This book was about personal experiences.
Yep.
And then it's in the hands of Hollywood.
Yep, SNL.
SNL, no less. How did you feel watching that first screening?
Oh, I just saw it 2 weeks ago, and
Okay.
I hadn't even read the screenplay at that point. So I was really nervous. Obviously, I was terrified. Is this going to be Anchorman in Afghanistan? But I trusted Tina Fey. I trust Robert Carlock, the screenwriter, and I trusted the people that bought it, that they wanted to honor the spirit of the book, which goes back and forth between dark comedy and really funny situations, and also a lot of sadness and tragedy. So the first half of the movie...
It's a unique tone.
Yeah, it is. Is it? I don't know. It's just the way I write. So and I think I hit that balance in the book pretty well. But I'm watching the movie. I'm with my brother because I needed somebody next to me, and he's just hitting me in the shoulder the entire time, laughing and pointing at me. And I'm watching it with one eye, like, is this okay? Is this okay? And you can't really tell because I'm watching her play me, and it's so meta, and she's a TV journalist, but in real life, I'm a print journalist. And halfway through, I just sort of sank into the story. And then I even teared up at one point. And at the end of it, and I've seen it again since, I'm really happy with what they did with it. Obviously, they've Hollywooded it up, and there's more bang bang in many respects. And there's different situations, and certain things are overlaid on my story that happened to other people. But it's really true to the narrative arc that I had over there, that we had over there. It shows the absurdity of the kabubble we lived in, going back and forth between covering really horrible things and really important things, and being so restricted in like what you could do in your off time that parties become your release.
I want to ask you about all of that in a little bit. I think people will be surprised for a Tina Fey project, the tone of this thing. What are the biggest changes from your book?
I'm a TV journalist in the movie. My name is Kim Baker instead of Kim Barker. There's a lot more explosions in the movie. I have a relationship with a man who's kidnapped by the Taliban, where in real life he's just a really good friend. My boyfriend, my hometown boyfriend, cheats on me in the movie. In reality, it wasn't so simple, and there wasn't any sort of cheating like that. It's always more complicated in real life, but I'm not upset with anything they did. I mean, they told me from the very beginning that they were going to have to fictionalize things.
So the core of it, there's a truth there that you appreciate. That must be a huge relief.
Oh yeah, my God! In every scene, there's something that refers back to the book. Even if they twist it from like things I just sort of wrote as descriptions, they change that into dialogue. Like the whole ranking system of women in Afghanistan. That's just something I wrote in the book. Like a 6 in New York would be a 10 in Kabul because there are no women there, no foreign women there. I was happy with it. And I was particularly happy with how they portrayed the relationship between my character, this gets super meta, Kim in the movie, and Fahim, who is the fixer.
Yeah.
And it was very respectful. And I felt like the way it treated Afghans was very respectful, yet truthful.
That must have been very important to you.
Yeah. It was a lot of a relief.
Hilarious story as to how Tina Fey came to be involved with this project. So
Yeah,
there was a New York Times review of your book when it first came out that called you a Tina Fey character.
Right. Yeah.
And now Tina Fey plays a version.
Yeah, because she's a total egomaniac and Googles herself all the time. No, I'm kidding. She makes that joke. It got into her hands through that review, and she read it. She loved it. And within 2 weeks of that review coming out, she had had Paramount option it on her behalf. And
within
she
2
was,
weeks?
yeah, within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And she's the one pushing this. I mean, she's producing it, has Robert Carlock, her right-hand guy, write it. And she's been the one behind this entire thing. And I think her fans will be really surprised by her performance in this movie, because in the trailer it just sort of looks like ha ha ha. But you've seen the movie, right?
I was totally surprised. It was not what I expected, given the title of the movie, given that it was Lorne Michaels' Tina Fey project. I think people will be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I want to get into your experience, Kim.
Sure.
You started covering conflict zones. At that time, you had 2 stamps in your passport.
Yep.
What made you want to go?
I think any journalist who sees a big story going on just wants to go. And I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could do it. I mean, when I first went over there, and my career has always sort of been like, if I'm faced with one choice that seems safe and one choice that seems more risky, I'm going to go for the riskier choice just to see if I can do it and to challenge myself. And after 9/11, I wanted to go. I was in Chicago and I wanted to go to New York. And, they sent a bunch of other people to New York. And then I heard that they wanted to try out more women overseas. And I immediately volunteered. I didn't think twice about it.
Was there a moment where you were over there and you felt, okay, I might be out of my depths here. This is
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Any particular moment that sticks in your mind?
Sure. I had gone to see, this is in March of 2003, and I had gone to see this warlord who's, I'd gone to see this warlord. Who doesn't want to meet a warlord? Whose son had just been killed by the Americans. And I went there with Farouk, who's my translator, and he was, paving the way for us to go there. And we had this interview where Farouk basically is protecting me the entire time, and I don't know till later what's going on. Where, because the Americans had been in a firefight with his son, and his son had been killed, the warlord. And I'm an American journalist. And so, this guy, Pasha Khan, the warlord, says to Farouk, where is she from? And Farouk says, Turkey. This is unbeknownst to me. And, it goes on from there where basically he's got me as a Muslim at a certain point, and then I'm a really bad Muslim because I don't know the prayers. And Farouk's protecting me and doing things like in translation where, the Pasha Khan asked me if I thought if I was scared of him. And Farouk asks me, he wants to know if you're scared of him. And I said, oh, no, he's perfectly nice. He's, fed us. He's done all this stuff for us. He seems like a really nice guy. And here's this guy sitting with a bandolier of bullets on surrounded by gunmen outside. And Farouk just smiles at me and turns to him and says, of course she is terrified of you. So he was sort of always smoothing the way for me. And then we got to Host, and we had to, of course, that's a town that's on the border of Pakistan, a very sort of Wild West, dangerous place at that point, still today. And, we find out that there are two journalists there, Afghan journalists, who worked for American outlets or Western outlets, and they had been held by Pasha Khan for 4 days, and their lives had been threatened. So at that point, I sort of went from, okay, this is serious. This isn't just sort of like this joke running around. Something could actually happen. And that was the first time I actually felt that.
Looking back now, what skills do you think it takes to be a good conflict reporter?
I think you have to be curious. Obviously, it's like with journalism in general. You have to be curious. You have to go into a story without having a preconception of what you think the story is. I think that's a mistake you make a lot. Especially if somebody else, another foreign correspondent, has covered something, I think the tendency is to do the same story. Well, the story might be different. So I always tried to go into any story just trying to listen to people and ask a lot of questions. You have to be able to, observe, joke around. I think you've got to keep your sense of humor. It's not an easy job to have. And you have to like meeting people from different cultures and be really open to different cultures. And I'm not sure if I was the greatest foreign correspondent, but I definitely think I had those skills. And, I very much enjoyed being over there.
I want to get into this juxtaposition you alluded to earlier. So in the movie, we kind of see two Afghanistans. We see life on the streets for the Afghan people, poverty, decades of violence.
Right.
And then there's a bit of a different Afghanistan, the foreign reporters, where they live in houses that seem like dorm.
Right. It's like a fraternity party.
Yeah, with big parties going on. That was true.
It was true. Yeah. I mean, and people might be really surprised by that. You're in a war zone. How could you be having parties? Well, Afghans have parties as well. Life doesn't stop just because you're living in a war zone. And people have senses of humor in a war zone. And I would challenge anybody who questions the idea of it. When you're covering things that are conflict all day, when you're covering suicide bombs, when you're covering women who throw acid on themselves rather than be in a forced marriage, or kids who become addicted to opium because their mother, is an opium addict. Those are horrible things to have to cover. And you see those, and you want to feel every one of those if you're going to do a good story. And I always tried to do that. And then, you don't have the sort of release that you have back here. It's not like you can go running down the street. It's not like you can even walk down the street. You can't. You can't go to the gym. You can't go for a hike. My mother just would say to me, why don't you just do yoga? And I'm like, oh, you go do yoga, Mom. But I'm going to go to the party, because it's like, and that's what we all did. When you live this sort of very restricted life, I think there's a natural desire for release.
Was that a challenge to break through, to sort of deal with that reality as you're trying to report these stories and kind of, because I'd imagine it'd be a bit of a shock to you when you arrive there to realize there's this party culture going on.
Oh, sure. I mean, like I didn't know at first, my first couple trips over there, there wasn't, and it was a very sort of ascetic life where I would, just sort of go to bed very early. Those were my first couple of trips over there. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved over to the region in 2004, and I think there was the first presidential election was coming up, and I was invited to my first party, and the name of the guest house was Afghan Gardens 1. And I'm invited to a party, and I have nothing to wear because I just have all my baggy clothes and I have my stuff for embed. So I put on my best outfit, which was baggy jeans, hiking boots, and this baggy T-shirt I found in my predecessor's trunk that I think she slept in. It said Turkey on the front of it, and it was all wrinkled, and Turkey was spelled like it is in Turkey, Turkiye, and it hung down to the middle of my thighs. And it was, again, very wrinkled. And I was like, this is the best I can do. And I show up at this party, and it's all these, like, gorgeous women, like, in little black dresses and high heels and, like, wearing great outfits. And I thought I had no idea that this was actually going on.
Bit of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. And and I felt like I wanted to write about that sort of dissonance going back and forth. And a lot of us had talked about how we knew it might seem strange to people. And that we also knew that, like, hey, you try coming over here. And, it would just be like you drink to celebrate life, you drink to forget, you drink to numb out. You probably drink too much.
It's part of the reality.
Yeah, it's part of the reality, and it's what foreign correspondents see the movie, and they're like, yeah, we had one of those in Iraq, we had that in, back in the day in Beirut. I just think it's natural when you're seeing stuff like that to need to, to feel like you need to numb out.
So, Kim, the movie emphasizes the unique position you have as a woman reporting in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. We'll get to the challenges, but were there any advantages?
Oh, there were tons of advantages of being a woman in Afghanistan. I mean, that's why you have so many great correspondents over in that region who've been women. I'm certainly, only one of them. I'm not saying I'm great, but I was only one of the women who were over there. And you would be seen, like, in Afghanistan as you weren't like a local woman, right? You weren't like a foreign man. You were like this weird sort of third sex who got access to all the women and could, tell the women's stories. I mean, they would talk to you in a way like they thought that you knew what they had been through. You were their sister. They would hold your hand, look at your cuticles.
Just automatically
hugging you, grabbing your face, touch. They would always want to touch my hair and want to comb my hair because, it'd be under the headscarf and it would just look like disaster. Afghan women, their hair under a headscarf, it comes off and it's all, long and luxurious, and mine is just like, sort of like sticking up in all these different directions. And they would always, like tell me to use conditioner and things like that. So there's this real sense of the women with sisterhood, like they want to tell you your stories. And in part it's because they think that, you're a woman, you're going to understand, and I'm definitely going to empathize a lot with it. But I, of course, I have no idea what it's like to be an Afghan woman. And then the Afghan men, I think, were kind of charmed by the idea of you running around the countryside, and might want to meet a foreign female reporter in person. So they would usually have you in pretty quickly. We had such advantages over the male reporters.
So if you play it just right, you can speak to both. And
oh yeah, I mean, it's not even a matter of playing it. It's just a matter of that's just the way it was. I think every single Chicago Tribune correspondent who went through there was a woman, and like the Washington Post had women, the New York Times had women. I don't know if that was by design or just by happenstance, but I think that like women just really do well there, and they like reporting out of there.
So clear advantages.
Yeah.
At the same time, there were some uncomfortable realities about being a woman there. We see it in the movie, but in real life, you had a weird experience interviewing Nawaz Sharif,
right,
the former Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Well, he's now the Prime Minister of Pakistan again. Yeah.
And what happened there?
Well, we had first met in person after Benazir Bhutto was killed, which was obviously a horrible time in the country. And we met and we had sort of a funny conversation, where I was supposed to get, I think, 15 or 20 minutes with him, and he kept asking me to ask more questions. And so at this point, I'm through all my main questions, and I'm just repeating myself. But, we had like a rapport, and it's always nice as a journalist when you find somebody who's willing to talk to you and answer your questions, who's obviously in a position of power, and he's the head of the opposition. He's also funny, and so we would joke around together. And like, it got to the point where I could call him and I could get comment for stories. And so I would help other correspondents get comments for stories. And then at a certain point, he asked me, it's like we were alone in a room and I was interviewing him. And it was strange because, normally we had other people with us. And he asked me if I had a friend. I think that was in August of 2008.
If you had a friend.
If I had a friend. Okay. Do you have a friend, Kim? And I said, yeah, I have a lot of friends. What are we talking about here? And so then he pushes and I go, oh, do you mean like a friend, a special? I mean, the way they use friend over there and they play with this in the movie, I'm like, what are we talking about here? And it turns out he wanted to know if I had a boyfriend. And I said, I had one and we just broke up. I'm kind of thinking like, where's this going? And he says, well, I would like to help you find a friend. And so then he's offering to set me up, and he asked me for my criteria, and I said, somebody tall, somebody smart, and somebody funny. And so he went through those criteria, clarifying them, and he said, like, he would look, but admitted that tall was very difficult in a country like Pakistan because it is a short people, and I'm 5'10". And then it was just sort of a joke. And I ran this past other Pakistani friends and they said, oh, he's just acting like your Punjabi uncle, And so this goes on for a while. There's an awkward lunch in there, and then there's the bombing in Mumbai. And I realized that he's the person I need to go see because I want to try to find the village where the one surviving bomber was from. And that was in his province of Punjab. So I went to go see him for what turned out to be the last time. And he had joked about like saying he wanted to buy me a phone. I thought he was joking. He wanted to buy me a phone so that we could talk without the ISI listening to us, which is the, spy agency in Pakistan. And so at this last conversation, he basically asked my translator to leave. I didn't even need a translator, but I sort of felt like I wanted somebody in the room.
Yeah.
And he said, he basically offered me the iPhone. I said no. And then he said, I know I'm not as tall as you want. I'm not as fit as you want. I'm fat and I'm old, but I'd still like to be your friend. So that was the line. It hasn't taken off yet in bars nationwide, but I'm hopeful. I'm ever hopeful. It was awkward.
I might try that one out.
It was awkward,
Now, a lot of journalists might not publish a personal story like that or about the partying that you mentioned earlier. Right. Why did you make that decision?
Well, because I came back from Afghanistan and Pakistan, and I felt... and I'd felt it over there at the same time. I'm losing my job at the Tribune and, they're cutting back their foreign positions. And I kind of felt like the last couple of years I was there, this sense of fury at everything that I felt was going wrong. And when I came out, I just wanted to see if it was possible to write something that would make people actually read about what had happened over there and read about Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I felt like the only way to do that was to put a Westerner at the center of it. I wanted to talk about the party life. I wanted to write something that was darkly comic so that people would actually read it. And so therefore, I'm at the center of it. I got to throw myself on my sword. I'm, so to speak, because, some people are like, why would you write about the party scene and put yourself in the middle of it? I'm like, otherwise it would be hypocritical. And that's how we lived,
Also, what I see is a big challenge, which is breaking through the fatigue. Around the war for a lot of readers.
And that's what I was trying to do, is come up with a different way to tell the story that's pretty entertaining, I think, and that you can read really quickly. And by the end of it, you have a greater sense of what's happened in Afghanistan and Pakistan. You've learned a lot. And I think there's humanity in it, in the relationship between myself and Farouk and, between me and Sean and between me and my driver in Pakistan. And I'm very much a stand-in for the naive America that goes over there and doesn't really know what's going on. And then you got, Nawaz Sharif is Pakistan playing a double game. I felt it was really important to tell that story, not only because I know it's funny, but because here's a man who was, when he was prime minister, came out and proclaimed himself, wanted to proclaim himself the leader of the faithful and pretend like he's such a pious man. And at the same time, he's hitting on me, and who knows what's happening with local Pakistani women. Yeah, I think that should be out there.
Did you ever feel a kind of fatigue around war stories?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, of course I felt a fatigue. It got tiring, being there, and you would feel like, oh, I've done this story before. I also got really tired of trying to, and they do this really well in the movie, I think, of trying to get space in the newspaper for stories about Afghanistan. It was just like you would pitch them and they'd be like, Afghanistan women, and you found yourself to the point where you're like, okay, how can I get, because this is still so important, how can I get this into the newspaper? How can I find a good story? And so we were always trying to find one. And our space in the paper just constantly shrank and shrank and shrank to the point where I was doing stories about pizza from Chicago being delivered to the Illinois National Guard for Super Bowl. I think that was a low point. That was definitely a low point.
At a certain point, Kim, in the film and you in real life
Right.
had to face a tough decision, which is when to quit war reporting.
Mm-hmm.
How did you go about making that decision for yourself?
I mean, I would love to be able to say that I made that decision for myself. But in reality, the Tribune called me back to Chicago and I quit. And then I had planned to stay in Afghanistan and write the book there and freelance. But then I got a fellowship at the Council on Foreign Relations, so I moved to New York to do the book. But I left all my stuff in Afghanistan. I left it in a trunk. I planned to come back at the end of this fellowship. It wasn't until I got through the writing of the book and was, adjusting into New York and realizing how difficult it was to come back and how kind of like, I just didn't want to go outside. I didn't really want to hang around other people who didn't, know the life I came from. That then I made the decision that it might be a good idea to stay. It was almost through the writing of the book and like also looking at how jaded I was at the end of my time there. And I remember covering a suicide bomb in August of 2009. I went to go see it for part of the book and I was there. And, I'm watching all these new reporters who've come in to cover the election, just like I had been in 2004. Mm-hmm. And young people saying, oh, did you get the car on fire? Did you get the body and all this stuff? And you're feeling like, oh my God, is that what I sound like? Is that what I sound like? And of course you have to get the story and you understand why people are talking like that. But when you take a step back, it sounds strange, you know?
Well, part of what the movie portrays is also this idea that you can get addicted to the high.
Right.
Was that something that you experienced, the high of war reporting?
I mean, I wasn't the sort of person who did a lot of bang reporting in terms of I wasn't ever in a firefight like she's in the movie. Mm-hmm. And I never saw an explosion up close like that. But I definitely and I think everybody who goes there gets addicted to the sense of telling these stories that feel like they're the most important stories in the world.
Sure, sense
and
of
being
purpose
on the ground,
like that,
a sense of purpose, a sense of feeling like this is my mission, and having dinner parties where you're talking about the future of countries as opposed to the latest TV show. It feels so important when you're doing it.
Do you ever miss your old life for that reason?
Oh, yeah, totally. Every day. I was just, Farouk last week was writing me an email because we were talking about this whole movie thing and trying to get him to the States for the premiere. And he's
in Canada now,
yeah,
by the way, right?
Yeah, he's in Canada.
Okay.
He's in Ottawa. And he's like, I got a desk job now. And he's like, I miss running around, Afghanistan with you guys. And, I'm like, me too, but we had to grow up.
And you fell in love with the countries.
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing you would want people to know about Afghanistan and Pakistan coming out of this film and out of reading your book?
I mean, they don't want war there. I think most average people, what they want is security and safety and a way to send their kids to school so they come home safe at the end of the day. They have senses of humor like you wouldn't believe. Everybody who reads English over there reads the book and they're like, oh, you get our sense of humor. You've got our sense of humor. And, they're so hospitable. I just go back to so many instances where you would meet somebody and they would invite you into your home as a stranger, or their home as a stranger, and feed you and treat you like you were a relative. And it's something that I really try to do, now with people coming into my country, despite, all the issues, with people talking about refugees there.
Thank you so much for your time, Kim.
Thanks for having me.